Well, you actually start closing so many loans using this method that they make you a branch manager.
Right. Yeah, Eagle made me a branch manager of the Brandon office. And then shortly after that, they were closed by the Department of Banking and Finance. That was the company I went to work for was called Eagle Lending. I worked for them for 6 months, and then they got closed by the Department of Banking and Finance closed them. They lost their credit line, and the Department of Banking and Finance closed them. I went to work briefly for another company, and then I opened my own place.
Okay, and this is Consortium Financial Services?
Right.
Okay. And your previous company, the reason they got closed, was it because of what you were doing?
No. No, they had lost their, no, they had offices all over the place. And there was a lot of, it was extreme subprime. And they lost their credit line because they had so many defaults that the company that was giving them their credit line eventually shut it off. And they got so many complaints in such a short period of time because they had people waiting to close that the Department of Banking and Finance came in and just said, you're done. We're pulling your license. You can't close any loans in Florida anymore.
Well, part of the reason they're having so many defaults is because you're setting up loans for people who can't pay them.
Right. Yeah. I don't think any of my people went under, but I don't really know. Could have been, listen, they had tons of offices. They had several hundred brokers. Who knows?
Okay. Okay, so then you start your own company, Consortium Financial Services. And at the time, the mortgage business was just booming in Tampa.
Right.
And you bring on a bunch of other brokers, and you guys basically just start doing fraudulent loans again.
Right. I'd say 80% of the loans that went through that company, the FBI said that about 80% of all the loans that went through the company were fraudulent. We had some people come in and, I'm doing an FHA loan and they qualify and they close. It's fine. But the vast majority of people had issues. And sometimes, honestly, they might have an issue that you still could have done a loan for. But if I created a document or two, instead of them going light doc or going stated income, they could go full doc and I could get them a lower interest rate and charge a couple points on the back of the loan. Well, then I'm going to make the W2s and pay stubs so I can get an extra 2 points on the back of the loan. Is that a fraudulent loan? It's definitely a fraudulent loan. They could have gotten a loan anyway, but it's still a fraudulent loan because the documents are false. They shouldn't have gotten that particular loan product.
Right. And at the time, you're actually creating forged checks and you're mass producing canceled checks at the same time.
Right. By that point, I think I'd actually made a bank, an online bank, so I could verify people's down payments. Your down payments have to be seasoned, so you have to have had the money in the bank for 90 days. A lot of people, the seller's giving them their down payment, or some family members giving down payment, or you're giving them their down payment. You're going to get it back somehow. And so I created online banks. I started manufacturing what appeared to be canceled checks. They weren't, but they appeared to be canceled checks. So if you were late on your rent and I provided these canceled checks, it looks like you've always been on time on your rent. In fact, you've been late several times.
Okay, and you actually created a fake bank in the process.
Yeah, I did a couple fake banks.
Okay, how do you create a fake bank?
I mean, at that time, assuming it would still be the same thing. I mean, I would just make a phony website for the Bank of Ybor, right? Like, Ybor City in Tampa. So the Bank of Ybor Bank, and it would be, bankofybor.com, and you could buy a domain name. I had one that was called Southern Exchange Bank of Clarksville.com. And then I simply copied the pages. You go get like a GoDaddy. This was back when you could go buy a basic GoDaddy template, and then I would just copy and paste SunTrust Bank pages into those pages and change the names and alter whatever I needed to make it sound like a very small local bank. Manufacture bank statements in color, front and back, just like the ones you get from Bank of America or anyone else, and it would have the website name on it and the 1-800 number or whatever number you're going to put. And so if they called the bank, they would get a recording. And if they went online, to check the bank statements, they could go online to the actual bank account or the bank website. And it looked like a regular bank. The underwriter doesn't know the difference. She's got bank statements. She made a call.
Right. Okay, but a bank has a routing number, and if you don't have a real bank, you don't have a routing number. And a
Right.
routing number is tied to the name of a bank. So if they were to check the routing number, they'll see that it either doesn't exist or belongs to another bank.
Right. But I would use, for instance, I used Southern Exchange Bank was a real bank. It had been bought out by SunTrust. So I used their routing number on the canceled checks. So you could check it with the banking database and it would say Southern Exchange Bank. But the website was Southern Exchange Bank of Clarksville. So if you checked it, and the Secret Service actually checked at one point that exactly what you're saying actually happened. When I actually got caught and the Secret Service thought I was hiding money, they started questioning me. And I said, I'm not hiding any money. And they said, we know you're hiding money. We know you've got like almost $200,000 in the name of Walter Holcomb. And he pulled out my bank statements and showed them. He goes, they're in Southern Exchange Bank, and pointed at the banks. And I went, bank statements. And I was like, are you serious? He goes, yeah, it's right here. And I went, did you go to the bank website? And he goes, yeah. I go, did you call the bank? He goes, yeah, I've left several messages. He goes, we just subpoenaed them. They'd subpoenaed the address that was in the database that had been closed for years. They just hadn't gotten anything back yet. So I said, did you go to the bank website? And he said, yeah. And I said, what did you think? And he went, well, it's a bank website. What do you mean? I go, it's convincing though, right? And he goes, I mean, it's a bank website. And he went, oh, Jesus. He goes, oh my God. He goes, it's fake. It's fake. I said, man, it's all an illusion. And so I had to explain the whole thing to him, and they'd had it for months and didn't realize that it was all fraudulent material. He couldn't figure out why nobody was returning the phone call.
Okay. And like you said earlier, the underwriters and the banks and so forth, they want these loans to go through. And especially at the time that you're talking about, this is before the housing crash and before everyone kind of tightened everything up.
Right.
They were trying to get people through the door. Everyone was trying to get their commission. If the person can't afford it, whatever, later on, these mortgages would get bundled in with other mortgages where you'd have like 9, A-level mortgages and 1 F, and you'd average them together, and you didn't realize that one of them was going to foreclose. So I remember this time, like everyone's just trying to get as much money as possible.
Right.
And I guess you had situations where you started actually buying gifts to some of the underwriters. I guess you bought one guy a Mercedes.
Yeah, I had one guy that worked for a company called United Capital Lending. Forget his last name. First name was Justin. Anyway, he was an underwriter, and we would send him loans, and if a loan didn't go through or it couldn't go through, he'd just call us up and say, look, change this, this, and this, and it'll sail right through. And so, I was paying him a couple $100 every time we did one. And eventually he came to me and said, look, I want a Mercedes compressor. And I went, okay, what color? So I got him a Mercedes compressor. I remember it had red interior, and he was a gay guy. And I just remember thinking I thought it was just the tackiest fucking thing ever. But he loved it, and he listened. The loans, we had a good 3 to 6 months where he just straight through.